Friday.
Sorry about that.
So for 3 Fridays in a row. This is 1 hour. Basically, I'm thinking of it like a 1 hour meditation, basically, with a little bit of explanation. So basically, like a meditation on compassion. And these days, most of the programs I'm doing at the centers in the area, I teach at there's 4 FPMT centers. FPMT is like I don't know, this kind of affiliate, not affiliated, but another Buddhist organization in the area that has 4 centers. One in SoCal, one in Boulder Creek, one in Campbell, and up in San Francisco. This one. So I'm mainly living here and teaching at those 4 centers for the past 3 months. I was saying most of the programs I do, I'm explaining stuff. Whereas this program I wanted to do, I thought most people are working. Oh hi. Most people working through the week, and they just like to do a little kind of gentle meditation practice on at the end of the week. And I don't get much chance to integrate like kind of more like faith-based practices, So I thought it'd be nice to integrate a little meditation on compassion with reciting this mantra, the mantra of the Buddha of compassion, which is the Mani mantra. I'll just show it to you all. So this is kind of what we're going to do over these 3 weeks: is meditate on compassion and the meaning of the mantra, also includes emptiness a little bit, and then practice visualizing this Buddha, the Buddha of compassion. The Buddha of compassion, appears in different forms. One is a 1,000-armed Chenrezig, which I don't think we have an image here, but this is the 4-armed Chenrezig. So this is kind of the simpler version. And then, there's other versions, including Kuan Yin, like in the Japanese tradition, Japanese Chinese tradition. There's appears in a female aspect, Kuan Yin. But in the Tibetan tradition, which is what I'm familiar with, then we'll mainly meditate on this aspect. So we'll mainly meditate on compassion a bit at the beginning, and then visualize the Buddha. And when we visualize the Buddha, the main thing is just to visualize. You don't have to think of all the detailed kind of appearance of the Buddha. The main thing is to feel that. And also, you don't have to be Buddhist to do this practice. Like you can also visualize, Jesus or Muhammad or Virgin Mary or whatever representation fits your mind for compassion. So the main essence is to visualize something that symbolizes like the perfection of compassion to you. And also the visual image is not so important as the feeling that, that whatever beings who have greater compassion than I do and have kind of the ability to benefit and guide me or inspire me in some way, that they're present here. So anyway, I'll describe all this more when we actually do the visualization. But we basically visualize kind of perfection of compassion, and then recite this mantra, the Mani mantra, together, and then imagine it kind of purifying mistakes and faults that we have, and helping us to develop more positive qualities, foremost among those, of course, compassion and wisdom. So that's kind of what we'll try to fit all of that in 1 hour, and leave a lot of space for you just to meditate without me talking. I'm thinking are planning to organize these 3 sessions. But this first session, we really emphasize just compassion alone. And then in the second session next week, we'll emphasize more the wisdom side of the path and how that relates to compassion. And then in the third week, we'll do meditation more on combining those 2, and really trying to more deeply identify with that and imagine ourselves to be the embodiment of perfect wisdom and compassion, and try to hold that kind of there's a kind of confidence, that we can do that. And each of those will combine again the visualization and the mantra recitation. And of course, if there's any questions you have, while we're meditating, it's not a good time to ask a question, but before that or after that, just speak up if you have any questions. Yeah. So I think why not? I'll explain the mantra in brief first, and then a bit more about compassion. So yeah. So this mantra is the mantra is Om, is read Om, Mani Padme Hum. And so the larger letters there is that's Tibetan script, which is based on Sanskrit script. So this is just the same mantra written in Tibetan, where the first syllable here. One, two, three. Anyway, this first syllable here is Om. And then these next two syllables, this one and this one, I don't know if you can see my cursor. It's Mani. That's not particularly important for you all. And then the next kind of group of syllables is Padme and Hum. So the Om, yeah, so again, this is the mantra of the Buddha of compassion. And maybe it's helpful just to explain, because many people think like, well, there's just one Buddha. So what's the Buddha of compassion? Because there's just Shakyamuni Buddha, right? The founder of Buddhism as it exists in the world now, Shakyamuni Buddha. Let's picture the that painting of that on the wall, Shakyamuni Buddha. But in the Buddhist kind of pantheon, actually, there's not Shakyamuni Buddha is not the only Buddha. A Buddha is an enlightened being. An enlightened being essentially is someone who in the past was an ordinary person like us. And then by practicing spiritual path, they gradually overcame or eliminated all faults, faults of body, speech, and mind. So of course, the faults of the body is where you use your body to harm others or yourself, primarily. Faults of the speech is where you use your speech in a way that's harmful to others. And then, but both of those arise from the mind, because all of our actions of body and speech are motivated by a thought, to do that, or some kind of instinct in our mind, some energy in our mind to compel us to act in that way. So the primary thing we need to be concerned about is transforming our mind in a positive way to reduce and eliminate the negative forces in our mind and increase as much as we can the positive forces in our mind. And that's the essence of Buddhist practice, like day in and day out, being aware of our own mind and being aware of what are destructive forces, what are positive forces in the mind, trying to reduce the one and increase the other. So a Buddha is a person who's practiced that over many, many lives now, and they've basically perfected their positive qualities. They've eliminated all faults of the body, speech, and mind, and they brought to perfection in the sense that there's no further way they can develop their positive qualities. So as much as possible, they develop positive qualities of body, speech, and mind. And then what do they do then? They because one of the main qualities, positive qualities of the mind is altruistic concern for others. And one of the main faults is selfish concern about oneself alone at the expense of caring about others. Right? So an enlightened being is someone who in the past, whether just like us, gradually they eliminated all this selfish concern and they fully developed an altruistic, loving kindness, compassion, and concern for the well-being of all beings, even more than for themselves. So what do they do after they become enlightened? They continually engage in activity to benefit sentient beings, like in countless forms, and they can appear in different forms. And so when we think about the Buddha of compassion, then, there's different ways to think about it. It's not simple. There's no simple kind of description to say this is what the Buddha of compassion is, right? It's like a diamond with many faces, no? You look at it from one way and it looks like this, and you look at it from a different way, it looks like this, no? So in one way, like the Buddha of compassion was an ordinary person in the past, like us, and then they practiced the spiritual path and became a Buddha. But why are they especially called the Buddha of compassion as opposed to the Buddha of wisdom or the Buddha of enlightened activity or Shakyamuni Buddha or Maitreya Buddha or medicine Buddha, something? in one way to think about it is that like each enlightened being, they, it's kind of like they have a special focus of activity to benefit sentient beings in accordance with the prayers that they made as they were practicing the spiritual path. Like each of us has different dispositions, right? So some like to cook, some like to drive, some like to garden, some like to, I don't know, play Scrabble or something like that. Like some like to walk outside, some like to just be inside and be quiet, some like sunny days, some like rainy days. So like that, like, and each of us, as we practice the spiritual path, we have certain affinities to some things and less interest in other things. So we can think of it like that, like the Buddha of compassion. One way to think of it is as someone who practicing the spiritual path, they especially cherished this attitude of care, of seeing the suffering of others, deeply empathizing with the suffering of others. Also, deeply understanding what it is to suffer because of their own experience of having, faced a lot of difficulties. And then, so they deeply empathize with the suffering of others. And then that's kind of really a focus of their spiritual practice. And they make prayers that in the future, when I become enlightened, I primarily want to work in ways to help others develop compassion, because I see the value of that attitude, that's primarily what I want to focus on is. And so then they make prayers that in the future, whoever sees my form, whoever recites my mantra, whoever says my name, may that become a special cause for them to generate compassion in their minds. And so that's why, there's many different mantras, right? It's like there's a mantra of Shakyamuni Buddha, a mantra of the Buddha of wisdom. There's countless different mantras. So why does this mantra, Om Mani Padme Hum, especially have power to help us generate compassion? Then, I mean, that's an object of faith. It's difficult to, scientifically say, well, this is because of this sound and this sound and this syllable or something. But the primary explanation is because the one who kind of created that mantra and the one who that mantra is associated with them as a person, the Buddha of compassion, that they made prayers. Whoever says this formulation of letters, whoever says this mantra in the future, may that have a special power that it helps them generate compassion in their minds. That's why it has power. It's kind of like, you can see a similarity. Like if we go to one place, like there's one bench maybe we like on a park trail somewhere, and every time we sit there, we make a prayer. Whoever sits there, may this and this come about. That prayer has power, and it affects the bench, it affects the environment, and it creates a kind of energy in that place. And then whoever comes there, then they feel something of that, even they're not, that's not what they're thinking of, because we've left that energy there. Then other people experience that when they come along. So you can see a reflection of like that many kind of ordinary places that we go. The place carries a kind of energy of all the activity, all the actions of body, speech, and mind, and especially the mind that have take place there. That's one reason, like when we go to a church, like we feel kind of peaceful, even if you're not Christian or something, or any religious place, because people come there and they make sincere prayers, and it has an effect on the minds of whoever goes to that place. Yeah, so on the one hand, the Buddha of compassion is this ordinary being who practiced with a special emphasis on compassion and made prayers that whoever recites this, whoever sees their form, sees their image, a statue of them or a painting of them, whoever recites their mantra, that affects their minds to have compassion. But a different way to look at the Buddha of compassion is because every enlightened being has perfected compassion. That's one of the positive qualities. Like every enlightened being has perfected every positive quality. So they all you can't say one enlightened being has more compassion than another. They all equally have compassion. So in another way, the Buddha of compassion is kind of an archetype. It's a kind of the visual appearance of that Buddha is just a representation of a quality that all enlightened beings have, and a quality that all of us have. All of us have compassion. Naturally, we have compassion maybe in a less developed form than others or than an enlightened being, but we all have, some degree of compassion, and thereby we have the potential to have infinite compassion. Like if we ask ourselves, what what's the degree to which I can increase my love for others, my caring about others, um, my understanding of things in the world. Like, it's not like like a pitcher that if we fill it up, it's this full, and then whatever else we pour, it just spills over. You can't fill it up any higher. Our mind's not like that. Our mind, the potential of our mind to increase in qualities of knowing, in clarity, in caring is infinite um, in the Buddhist view. Now we might think, well, it's limited by the time I'm alive, because we're not going to be alive forever. So maybe, well, we can increase those qualities for however many years we have left in life. But well, I mean, that's something different people have different beliefs about. But typically in the Buddhist view, like, well, there's rebirth. The mind, the body ends at death. It's true. When we die, our body ceases to function, but the stream of consciousness continues on. And thereby we can develop positive qualities from life to life and build on. It's not like every life we just start from scratch again. We start from, having, we maintain some momentum and some degree of the qualities we've developed in one life. And then maybe we're probably set back a little bit because when we die, but in the next life, you start from a higher place than you started off in the life before. So you can keep building. Unless, of course, you just give up the whole thing, which is a danger. And then you regress. Different things happen to people. Yeah, I mean, that's maybe just, it's good just to clarify that. The Buddhist view is not that every sentient being is just from life to life is getting better and better and better. It's not like that. Some lives we get better, and then sometimes something happens and we feel, whatever. We do something very destructive to ourselves and to others, and then the next life we're set back. So in the Buddhist view, like, you go up and down, up and down, up and down, from life to life. Anyway, we don't need to think too much about our past and future lives. So that's a little bit about what we mean by the Buddha of compassion. On the one hand, it's like a particular, we can think of as a particular person who, when they, before they became enlightened, they made prayers that whoever visualizes me, prays to me, recites my mantra, and has a special power to generate compassion. On another way, we can think it's an archetype that represents the enlightened qualities of all, the compassionate quality of all enlightened beings. And in another way, similar way, we can also think it's a representation of our own potential to generate perfect compassion. Okay, so let's get to, well, what do we mean by, I'm saying compassion, compassion, compassion. What do we mean by compassion in Buddhism? And then and how do we meditate on compassion? So in Buddhism, and I can't speak, when I say Buddhism, I should maybe, it's like disclaimer that I'm speaking about it as it's understood within the Tibetan tradition, which comes from the ancient Indian tradition. And within the ancient Indian tradition, already in ancient India, there were different branches of Buddhism, the Theravada and the Mahayana primarily, but within those, there's also subdivisions. But the Tibetan tradition primarily is based on the works of the scholars of ancient Nalanda monastery, like Nagarjuna, Chandrakirti, Asanga, Vasubandhu, and then later Atisha and so forth. And within the Tibetan tradition, there's different schools that have arisen. The Nyingma is the oldest school, and then the Shakya, the Kagyu, and then the youngest, the Gelug. So I primarily studied and trained in the Gelug school. But one of my main teachers is His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And His Holiness Dalai Lama is in the Tibetan tradition. Somehow the Tibetans from the very early beginnings of Buddhism in Tibet, which would have been about 1,500 years ago, they have a very strong connection with particularly the Buddha of compassion, Chenrezig. So His Holiness the Dalai Lama is considered by Tibetan people to be an emanation of the Buddha of compassion, of this Buddha, in human form. And so, this is a practice, the recitation of the Mani mantra. And of course, it's His Holiness' main message in the world is the value of compassion, to try to increase our own practice of compassion, whether we're Buddhist or non-Buddhist, whether we're religious or not. that this Holiness encourages us to reflect again and again on the value of compassion for ourselves, so in our own personal life, and also in society, and in facing any difficulties that we encounter in life with other people, political situation, environmental situation. Like compassion helps with everything. So then back to, well, what do we mean by compassion? Essentially, compassion is when we see and we feel, we recognize a degree of suffering, a type of discontent, problem, painful feelings, painful experiences, dissatisfying, fundamentally dissatisfying experience of ourselves or of others. So when in relation to, and really to have genuine compassion for others, we really need to learn to have compassion for ourselves. Now, if we don't genuinely, if we can't admit our own suffering, and be aware of our own suffering. Even sometimes, one reaction to discomfort in the body or in the mind is to try to just not think about it, right? Just try to push it aside. But it's not a skillful way to deal with it, because as long as there's a problem within ourselves or within a family or within an organization, if we just keep push it aside and try to avoid talking about it, avoid thinking about it, avoid doing anything about it, then nothing gets done about it, of course. And then it just usually it becomes worse and worse. Some problems go away, but many don't. I do think some people, I know they get a cavity, they feel a little pain in the tooth, but they know they don't like to go to the dentist, so they don't think about it. They don't really pay attention to it. They don't look at it. They don't have it checked, and then it gets worse and worse and worse. And then they only deal with it when it's a really big problem, and then they have to have a root canal or treatment placed, or it's a much bigger issue. So it's important to, to, in a way, not to be afraid of acknowledging our own suffering, acknowledging the suffering of others, because it's something we all have. I think you can point to anyone in the world, or any animal in the world who doesn't have some degree of difficulty, suffering. So suffering of ourselves. So compassion, in essence, is when we see and we observe the suffering of ourselves and the suffering of others, and we just have the wish to be free from that. Right? That's all. It's the wish that oneself or others be free from suffering. And of course, there's different degrees of that. According to the time we have, we can go through. And there's different types of suffering. But that's the basic thing. I mean, that's a universal thread through every instance of compassion, as we observe suffering of ourselves or suffering of another sentient being, another person who's like us and wanting to be free from suffering, and we wish for ourselves, or we wish for others to be free from that. So I think the basic technique to meditate on compassion is, first quiet the mind, generate some mental focus, and then, because the more distracted our thoughts are when we meditate, then the less powerful it is, right? So to generate we give ourselves opportunity to generate a powerful degree of compassion, and it's important to focus the mind. And then we'll begin by trying to become aware of different sufferings that we have in our body or in our mind. And then we try to generate the attitude of compassion, wishing that we be free from that. It's just a very caring. It's not up in the mind thinking, oh, may I be free from this, may I be free from that. It's not like an intellectual thought. Of course, it can start like that, and that can support it. But genuinely, it comes from the heart. It's a feeling in the heart. It's a genuine wish that one be free from suffering. So we meditate on that first for ourselves, and then we'll see how it goes. And we'll meditate on for others. When we meditate on compassion for others, we'll start with one person who we find easy. We easily have a caring attitude towards, and then we'll try to expand that to another person who maybe we don't have a special affection for or animosity towards, just a neutral attitude. And then, yeah, we'll see how time goes. But I mean, the most difficult is to extend this attitude of caring and compassion towards those whom we typically dislike. We typically have some kind of animosity towards. But it's very important to try to extend this um, compassionate mind, attitude. I mean, ultimately, we want to do it. We want to extend it towards all beings, without um, without any discrimination among others, without any bias among those whom we extend this wish towards and those whom we don't. But that's not easy to do, so we work towards that gradually. Maybe one other thing that maybe it's important and helpful to say is that oftentimes with attitudes, like, it's just like with happiness, or loving kindness, or compassion, like mental clarity, or we oftentimes we have the um, what do you say? Well, we tend to think that, well, either you have it or you don't. No, it's something that either naturally you're happy or you're not, or you're unhappy. Either naturally you're a kind person or you're not, or that we tend to think we don't have so much control over those things, and that to try to like in the context of meditating compassion, some people might think to try to generate more compassion is kind of fake, you know. That you either genuinely have it or you don't, and there's nothing you can do about that. But that's not the case. And but you should question everything you hear me you say, that I say, or the Buddha says, or anyone says, right? So something I encourage you, if you have that kind of doubt, just try to have an open mind and be objective and experiment, and you see if I put more effort into generating compassion in the way we're doing here, can it be something that is natural also? So the Buddhist idea is that, yes, sometimes when you start to generate a positive attitude, or generosity, or compassion, or forgiveness, it can feel a little fake, and it is contrived at first. You have to make effort to generate that. But actually, because we all have the seeds to naturally have a positive attitude, then what we're doing is kind of watering that seed. In a way, you could think of it like growing a plant. Like, yes, if you just eat avocado and then take the seed and just throw it on the ground, maybe it won't grow, right? But if you dig some earth up and put it below the earth and water it and kind of care for it, then it will grow, right? And so, yeah, that's that digging up the earth, watering it, caring for it is kind of a contrived activity, but it enables something very natural to happen, which wouldn't happen if you didn't help it, right? So that's kind of the attitude for the approach towards generating more and strengthening positive attitudes we all have. So one is be open to increasing a positive attitude without thinking that it's kind of fake. And then the other thing is that just like, and it's also related to this analogy of we all have the seeds of kindness and compassion, but they need help to grow, is that, different people have very different kind of ways of relating to positive attitudes according to their own life experience. And within our life experience in this context, one of the most important is like how others have treated us since we've been very young, especially since we're a child. So I think for people who had very kind parents and a very compassionate father or mother or grandparent or teacher or friend, then tapping into that example that we've seen of us being treated with compassion by others is a huge help. It makes it a lot easier than for us to generate. If we haven't really had that, in an unfortunate circumstance, we haven't really had someone treat us, especially with kindness and affection and compassion, then it's harder to do because we don't have like a very compelling role model that a personal experience of a role model. Yes, we can all look at a distant role model, like as well as the Dalai Lama or someone in the past, like Martin Luther King or something, but that's not the same as having someone you have personal contact with. But as we meditate on compassion, it's really helpful to draw on whatever personal experience we've had of being treated with compassion. And when we were suffering, when we were down, and someone genuinely saw that, they sympathized with us. We had a sense that they, to some degree, they know what I'm experiencing, and they genuinely just wish for us to be free from that. Then that helps us, to extend that same kindness towards others. Okay, I think that's enough said. So let's just sit comfortably and focus our mind. So probably you're all familiar with meditation to some degree. So if you already have an object of, when that you use for focusing your attention, whether it's your breath or something you visualize, or another object of meditation, of shamatha or placement meditation, then use that. Otherwise, for beginners, an easy one to use is just to breathe naturally and try to be fully aware of the sensations of breathing. So with kind of 75% of your mental energy, just focus on the object of meditation, the breath, or another object. And then with the other 25% of your mental energy, then be aware of yourself in the process of meditation, and especially be alert for distraction, when distraction arises. When your attention wanders off to think about something else in the past or the future, or just starts paying attention to something else, even in the present. And then notice that as a distraction in the context of meditation, and let go of that for the time being, and let's come back to all these things later, and just try to relax and focus your attention for a few minutes. And then gradually shift your the focus of your attention to your own um, suffering experiences. And if you're new to this like meditation of compassion, don't for yourself. You want to have to be careful not to, if there's very painful or tragic or disturbing things that happen to you in your life, there's a danger that if we try to address those most intense suffering we've ever experienced immediately, that the mind kind of is overwhelmed by memories of that experience. So we want to, if you're new to this, then start with kind of small to medium experiences of suffering, and then try to generate compassion in relation to those first. And then as you become more comfortable with that, then you can address greater and greater challenges. But in short, think of your own, in whatever way you're comfortable now, it makes sense to you, right? And just bring to mind and be aware of either, suffering experiences in the present and the past, and feel how those are, painful and difficult and disturbing, unpleasant. And with each aspect of or each experience that you think of, make the reframe in response to each awareness of each different type of awareness of suffering that oneself has or has had. Make the reframe, may I be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, and specifically this, may I be free. And we don't have to know how that will work out or what benefit that has, but just try to generate that attitude, a caring attitude for oneself. Thinking, may I be free from the suffering and the causes of suffering. So try that for a couple of minutes. So if you have some feeling of that, compassion for yourself, so now we'll direct your attention to another person or several other people, whatever is comfortable.
aversion toward them. You just kind of have a neutral attitude towards. So this is a bit more difficult than extending compassion to a friend. So try to think of at least one or several other strangers. Again, recognizing how they, even we don't know much about their lives, that, everyone has sickness, has disappointment, has loneliness, unhappiness. Everyone suffers different, sufferings, experience different sufferings and tragedies in their life. And so extend this attitude of compassion towards at least one stranger. Mm. So now we'll incorporate the mantra and the visualization. So, yeah, first just briefly, as best you can, visualize the Buddha of compassion in the space in front. So at the level of your forehead, a few yards, 2 or 3 yards distant in the space in front. Then, yeah, seated on an open lotus blossom and a moon disk. Then imagine the Buddha of compassion, Chenrezig in Tibetan, or Avalokiteshvara in Sanskrit, then appears there on the space. His body is made of white light, and he has 4 arms, holding two hands are in the mudra of prostration at his heart, and then 2 hands are kind of outstretched. The right hand holding a crystal rosary, a mala, and the left hand holding an open lotus blossom, like a pink lotus blossom. And his face is very radiant, like the full moon, has bright red lips, and his mouth is shaped in a smile. So I think he's looking upon you affectionately and looking upon all sentient beings with great affection. His eyes are long and well-shaped. His hair is blue-black in color and long. Half of his hair is piled up on top of his head, held by a small crown and different jewels. And then half of his hair, his long black hair, falls down over his shoulders and back. He wears earrings and necklaces, anklets and bracelets made of precious jewels like rubies and emeralds, diamonds and pearls. He sits in the lotus cross-legged posture. And from every pore of his body, light rays emanate out in all directions. But the main thing, like I said before, is to feel that the essence of the enlightened quality of compassion is in this space, appearing in this space before you. You can also just visualize like the full moon or a disk of white light or whatever, a lotus blossom, whatever appeals to you. So try to focus on that presence of the enlightened energy of compassion, and then for a minute or two, and then we'll recite the mantra. Om Mani Padme Hum. So yeah, you can visualize that at the heart of the Buddha of compassion is a moon disk, and upon that stands the syllables of the mantra, are standing upright, made of very brilliant light, white light or rainbow-colored light, and they circle clockwise. So as we recite the mantra, imagine from the heart and from all the pores of the body of the Buddha of compassion, then first white light rays radiate out, and then some light rays flow into you, to your crown or into your heart, and then purify every aspect of suffering of your body, speech, and especially your mind. And the same for all the other sentient beings that we share the world with. So we recite the mantra and then visualize these white light rays flowing out, purifying ourselves and purifying others. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Oi mani padme hum. Oi mani padme hum. Oi mani padme hum. Oh, Mani. Oh, Mani. Padme Hum. Oh, Mani. Padme Hum. Mani Padme Hum. So maybe for a minute we can just quietly recite the mantra under your breath and focus on the visualization and the feeling of yourself and other sentient beings, especially those you've focused on in your meditation, being completely pure, completely purified and freed of every form of suffering and the cause of suffering. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 So then just focus on this feeling of yourself being completely purified. Imagine your body and mind completely filled with blissful white light and feel complete as if you're completely purified, completely freed or cleansed of every form of suffering and the cause of suffering. And then the same for those you meditated on, and imagine the same for all other sentient beings. They're filled with blissful white light, and they're completely freed of every form of suffering of body and mind and the causes of those. And then we conclude just with a prayer by generating a prayer in our hearts that may this actually come to be. And may I and all other sentient beings, all the human beings, whatever, wherever they live, uh, whatever their disposition is, whatever situation they're in life, and all the animals as well, all the insects, the mammals, the fish, the birds, and whatever other beings exist, all the hell beings, hungry ghosts, gods, and demigods. In short, may every sentient being who is like myself and wishing to be free from suffering and wishing to have well-being and happiness and has the potential for these, may all beings be free from suffering. Yeah, okay, so we'll conclude there. We've already gone over time a little bit. Hope now that you have to get back to work right away. So thank you all. Yeah, I'm not in a hurry to go anywhere. If you, any of you have questions, I'm here. I can answer, but if you need to go, you're so welcome to go.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah, I hope anyone who come back next week, please do and invite anybody that you think might appreciate this wonderful teaching. I felt better.
Yeah, me too. It always feels good, no? Meditate on compassion. And I always feel the mantra always does more than I expect, no? Maybe I'm a bit skeptical. But it always, to me, it gives very nice, adds very nice energy in the heart, no? To say the mantra. You're welcome.
So at the end, do we just like let go of the visualization and just sort of meditate on the feeling? Is that the offering?
Well, there's different ways to integrate that into your practice. Now, if it's, I mean, yeah, one way is just to let go and just trust that, you know, we've just spent an hour habituating our mind to compassion, and naturally some of